For years, every woman wanted his money, his power, or his famous name. So the Korean Mafia boss hid his true identity and lived as an ordinary man. Then one rainy evening, he met a woman who shared her umbrella with a complete stranger, not knowing she was standing beside the most feared man in Korea. But when his carefully hidden past began catching up with him, she made a choice that changed both of their lives forever. She could have walked away the moment she learned who he really was. She could have feared him like everyone else did. Instead, she looked into his eyes and saw something no one had noticed for years, a lonely man who had forgotten what it felt like to be loved without conditions. But would that love survive once the truth came to light? Stay until the very end, because this unforgettable story proves that sometimes the strongest hearts are hidden behind the coldest faces. If you love Korean billionaire romance and mafia love stories like this, subscribe now to @Official_Threads and turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. The city of Seoul glittered beneath thousands of lights, but behind its beauty lived a man whose name made powerful people lower their voices. To the world, he was Kang Hyun-jae, a successful businessman whose companies stretched across continents. Only a handful of trusted people knew the truth. Behind the elegant suits, luxurious penthouses, and billion-dollar empire stood the quiet leader of one of Korea's most feared mafia organizations. Hyun-jae was only 34, but his life had aged him far beyond his years. His broad shoulders carried more than responsibility. They carried betrayal, loneliness, and endless expectations. People admired him. People feared him. But no one truly knew him. Every woman introduced to him seemed fascinated by the same things: his wealth, influence, expensive gifts, and luxurious lifestyle. Conversations always ended with questions about his companies, his cars, or the size of his mansion. Never about his dreams. Never about his fears. Never about the scars hidden behind his calm expression. After another failed relationship ended with someone secretly negotiating business favors through him, Hyun-jae quietly reached a decision. He disappeared. Not forever. Just long enough to discover whether genuine love still existed. He handed daily operations to his most trusted advisors while secretly renting a modest apartment on the opposite side of Seoul. Instead of wearing custom-tailored suits worth thousands of dollars, he dressed in simple jeans, plain shirts, and comfortable sneakers. Instead of driving imported luxury cars, he rode the subway. For the first time in years, nobody bowed when he entered a room. Nobody called him chairman. Nobody expected perfection. It felt peaceful. Every morning, he stopped by the same little cafe, before work at a neighborhood architecture studio where he volunteered as a consultant under a different name. The cafe wasn't famous. Its tables were old. The music was soft. The coffee smelled comforting rather than expensive. And every morning, someone greeted every customer with the same bright smile. Her name was Zuri. She had moved to Korea several years earlier after earning a scholarship in environmental design. Although life had not unfolded as she expected, she never allowed disappointment to harden her heart. She worked at the cafe during the day while continuing freelance illustration projects at night. Customers remembered her kindness more than their coffee. She remembered birthdays. She remembered favorite drinks. She noticed when someone looked exhausted. Even strangers left smiling after meeting her. Yet few knew that she quietly skipped meals some evenings to save money for her younger sister's education overseas. She never complained. She simply kept smiling. One rainy evening, business slowed. Heavy rain poured against the cafe windows as people rushed home beneath umbrellas. Hyun-jae entered completely soaked. He had forgotten his umbrella after leaving work. His wet clothes dripped onto the floor. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I'll clean that." Before anyone else could respond, Zuri laughed gently. "It's only rain." She handed him a clean towel. "You look freezing." He accepted it, surprised. Most people only noticed how he looked. She noticed how he felt. She prepared a cup of hot tea without charging him. "You ordered coffee yesterday," he said. "So why tea?" She smiled while wiping another table. "Because today your hands are shaking." He looked down. She was right. Nobody had noticed something so small in years. Not even himself. Something inside him shifted. It was almost too small to recognize. But it was there. For several silent seconds, neither of them spoke. Outside, rain continued falling. Inside, a lonely man experienced warmth he had almost forgotten existed. From that evening onward, visiting the cafe became the favorite part of his day. They talked about ordinary things. Favorite books, old movies, street food, music, childhood memories. She never asked what he earned. She never searched his name online. She simply enjoyed talking to him. For Hyunjae, that felt strangely unfamiliar. Days slowly turned into weeks. One afternoon, while walking through a neighborhood market, Hyunjae noticed an elderly woman struggling with heavy grocery bags. Before he could move, Zuri was already helping her. She carried the bags all the way home despite being late for work. When they finally left, Hyunjae smiled. "You'll probably get in trouble." She shrugged. People matter more than schedules. Those simple words stayed with him long after they separated. Meanwhile, back inside his luxurious mansion, his absence was beginning to raise questions. His loyal assistant, Min Suk, watched board members whisper among themselves. Several powerful investors wanted Chairman Kong to attend upcoming meetings personally. Others wondered why the feared Mafia boss had become impossible to find outside official business. Hyunjae insisted everything continue normally. No one was allowed to follow him. No one was allowed to investigate the woman he had met. He wanted whatever existed between them to remain untouched by his influence. Little did he realize that secrets rarely stay hidden forever. One weekend, Zuri invited him to a community garden where volunteers planted flowers for children visiting a nearby hospital. Hyunjae hesitated. No security, no bodyguards, no assistants. Just ordinary people laughing together beneath warm sunshine. He agreed. As they planted flowers side by side, dirt stained his hands. He laughed after accidentally spilling water over his shoes. Zuri couldn't stop laughing either. "You don't seem like someone who's done this before." "I haven't. It suits you." "No one has ever said that." She tilted her head. "Then they've been looking at the wrong things." Her words caught him completely off guard. For years people admired his expensive watches, his tailored suits, his influence. She admired the smile appearing on his face while planting flowers. He found himself looking at her differently too. Not because she was beautiful, although she truly was. Her beauty came from something much deeper. She made ordinary moments feel extraordinary. She made silence feel comfortable. She made kindness seem effortless. For the first time in years, Hyunjae wondered what life would look like if he no longer had to hide behind titles. But what he didn't know was that fate had already begun testing the fragile happiness growing between them. As they prepared to leave the garden, a sleek black luxury sedan quietly stopped across the street. A sharply dressed executive stepped out. He looked directly toward Hyunjae before lowering his head respectfully. The gesture lasted only a second. Hyunjae's expression immediately changed. He subtly shook his head, signaling the man to leave without speaking. Zuri noticed everything. The expensive car, the respectful bow, the sudden tension in Hyunjae's eyes. She didn't ask questions. Not yet. But for the very first time, she realized the quiet man she had come to admire might be hiding a life far different from the one he had shared. And without either of them knowing it, that single silent moment would become the beginning of a truth neither heart was ready to face. The following week, the image of the black luxury sedan refused to leave Zuri's mind. She had noticed the way the elegantly dressed man bowed to Hyunjae with unmistakable respect. It was not the kind of greeting given to an ordinary office worker. Yet Hyunjae had quickly brushed it aside with a calm smile, changing the subject before she could ask a single question. Zuri could have let her curiosity take over, but that had never been the kind of person she was. Everyone carried a story they were not ready to tell. If Hyunjae wanted her to know his, he would tell her when the time was right. That quiet decision made him trust her even more without her realizing it. Meanwhile, Hyunjae found himself thinking about her long after they parted each evening. During executive meetings, while board members discussed billion-dollar investments, his thoughts drifted back to the little cafe where laughter came easier than business negotiations. His advisors noticed the change. Chairman Kong no longer looked constantly exhausted. He smiled more often. He listened more patiently. Even his employees whispered that something wonderful must have happened. But no one knew the reason behind the transformation. Every evening after work, Hyunjae stopped by the cafe, not because he wanted coffee, but because he wanted 5 minutes with the woman who made the world feel lighter. Sometimes they walked through quiet streets after a shift ended. Sometimes they sat on a bench beside the Han River, watching the city lights dance across the water. They never needed expensive restaurants or luxurious hotels. Simple conversations became their greatest adventure. One evening, Zuri asked softly, "If you could start your life over, what would you change?" Hyunjae remained silent for a long moment. Finally he answered, "I would choose a life where people met me before they heard my name." She looked at him with gentle curiosity. That sounds lonely. It is. For a brief second, his carefully built emotional walls almost disappeared. He wanted to tell her everything. He wanted to confess that every day he lived behind a mask, that every decision he made carried consequences for hundreds of people, that he often wished he could wake up as an ordinary man. But fear stopped him. Would she still smile at him if she knew the truth? Or would she become like everyone else? The question haunted him. A few days later, the cafe owner announced that the old coffee machine had finally broken beyond repair. Without it, the cafe would struggle to stay open. Replacing it would cost more money than the owner could afford. Everyone looked worried. The cafe wasn't just a business. It was home to people who had nowhere else to go. That evening, Hyun-jae quietly made a phone call. The next morning, workers arrived carrying a brand new coffee machine. The delivery note simply read, "A gift from someone who believes kindness deserves to continue." No company name, no signature, no explanation. The owner was overwhelmed with gratitude. Customers celebrated. Zuri smiled as she read the anonymous message. "I hope whoever did this receives kindness in return." Standing across the street, unnoticed, Hyun-jae smiled to himself. For the first time in years, giving without recognition felt more rewarding than receiving praise. But what happened next surprised him even more. That afternoon, he visited the cafe as usual. Instead of thanking him, because she had no idea he was responsible, Zuri handed him a homemade lunchbox. "I made extra today. You don't have to do that." "I know." "Then why?" She smiled. "Because you've been skipping lunch almost every day." He blinked. "You noticed?" "I noticed lots of things." No expensive gift anyone had ever given him compared to that simple lunchbox. Inside were rice, vegetables, grilled chicken, and a handwritten note. "Take care of yourself. Someone has to." He folded the tiny note carefully and slipped it into his wallet. It would remain there for years. Meanwhile, inside the enormous Kong family estate, concern continued to grow. Min Suk respectfully approached Hyun-jae during a private meeting. "Chairman." Hyun-jae looked up. "You've been happier recently." "I have. I've never seen you like this." A faint smile crossed Hyun-jae's face. "Neither have I." Min Suk hesitated before speaking again. "Have you told her who you are?" The smile disappeared. "No. The longer you wait, the harder it becomes." "I know. What if she discovers it from someone else?" Hyun-jae lowered his eyes. "That's exactly what I'm afraid of." Those words echoed in his mind long after the meeting ended. Meanwhile, Zuri received wonderful news. One of her environmental illustrations had been selected for a public exhibition celebrating young international artists living in Korea. She was overjoyed. It was the opportunity she had prayed for. When she nervously invited Hyun-jae to attend the exhibition, he accepted without hesitation. The gallery opened on a bright Saturday morning. Beautiful paintings and architectural designs filled the spacious hall. Visitors admired the creativity displayed throughout the exhibition. Standing before her artwork, Zuri looked nervous. What if nobody likes it? Hyun-jae smiled warmly. They already do. How can you tell? Because it carries your heart. She looked at him quietly. You always know the right thing to say. No, I only say what I truly believe. Those words lingered between them. As they continued walking through the exhibition, an elderly professor approached Zuri. I remember your scholarship interview years ago, he said kindly. You refused offers that would have made you wealthy because you wanted your work to help communities instead. She laughed shyly. My dreams have always been simple. The professor smiled before walking away. Hyun-jae looked at her with admiration. So that's who you are. She frowned playfully. What do you mean? You've never chased money. She laughed. I've chased peace. That answer touched him more deeply than she could imagine. Because peace was the one thing his fortune had never been able to buy. As evening approached, they left the gallery and walked beneath rows of blooming trees. Soft petals drifted through the air around them. Without thinking, Zuri reached over and brushed a flower petal from his shoulder. Their eyes met. Neither of them spoke. The silence felt different this time. Warmer. Closer. Hyun-jae gently took her hand. I've never met anyone like you. She smiled softly. I was about to say the same thing. For a moment, the busy city disappeared. There were no titles. No expectations. Only two lonely hearts discovering that home could exist inside another person's presence. Then, slowly, he asked, Would you have dinner with me tomorrow? She laughed. I thought that's what we've been doing for weeks. I mean a real date. Her cheeks turned pink. I'd like that. Hyun-jae smiled in a way no one in his organization had ever seen before. He felt hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, he could finally tell her the truth. But destiny had already begun arranging something neither of them expected. Late that evening, as Hyun-jae returned to his modest apartment, a black envelope rested quietly outside his door. There was no address, no stamp, only his real family emblem embossed in silver. His expression immediately darkened. Inside was a single handwritten sentence. You may hide from the world, Chairman Kong, but your world has already found you. At that exact moment, several streets away, Zuri stood inside the cafe preparing to close for the night when a customer accidentally left behind a business magazine. As she picked it up to place it on the shelf, the cover caught her attention. Printed across the front page was the photograph of one of Korea's most powerful businessmen. His tailored suit, his calm eyes, his unmistakable face. The headline praised the mysterious billionaire who had not appeared in public for months. Zuri froze. Her heart skipped a beat. The man smiling from the magazine looked exactly like the ordinary stranger she had slowly begun falling in love with. And suddenly, every unanswered question came rushing back at once. Zuri stared at the magazine for what felt like an eternity. The cafe had grown completely silent. The last customer had already left. The lights outside reflected softly against the rain-speckled windows, and yet her eyes never moved from the photograph on the cover. The man smiling confidently beside the headline looked exactly like Hyun-jae. The same calm eyes, the same gentle smile that appeared whenever she laughed, the same face she had come to trust. Her heart raced as she read the article again. Kong Hyun-jae, the mysterious billionaire whose business empire continues to expand despite his absence from the public eye. She whispered to herself, this can't be. She wanted to believe it was simply someone who looked like him. But deep inside, she already knew the truth. Suddenly, the expensive black sedan, the respectful bow, his knowledge of fine art, his quiet confidence, his habit of paying attention to every little detail. Everything finally made sense. Yet instead of anger, one question echoed inside her heart. Why didn't he trust me enough to tell me? She carefully folded the magazine and carried it home. That night, neither of them slept. Across the city, Hyun-jae sat alone in his apartment, the black envelope resting on the table before him. He knew there was no more time. Someone within his organization had discovered where he had been spending his days. If the truth reached Zuri through strangers instead of him, she would feel betrayed. And she would have every reason to. He closed his eyes. For years he had commanded hundreds of people without hesitation. Yet the thought of telling one woman the truth terrified him more than anything else. Meanwhile, Zuri sat by her apartment window watching the rain fall. She replayed every conversation they had ever shared. Every smile. Every quiet walk. Every cup of coffee. Had any of it been real? Or had she simply fallen in love with another carefully crafted disguise? She didn't know what hurt more. The possibility that he had lied. Or the possibility that he had been too afraid to tell the truth. The next morning arrived with unusually clear skies. Hyun-jae stood outside the cafe long before it opened. His hands were tucked into his coat pockets, but for the first time in years they trembled. When Zuri arrived, she stopped several steps away. Neither of them spoke. The silence between them felt heavier than words. Finally, she lifted the folded magazine from her bag. I think we need to talk. Hyun-jae lowered his eyes. I know. They walked together to the quiet riverside where they had shared countless peaceful evenings. This time, neither of them admired the view. Zuri held the magazine in her hands. Who are you? Hyun-jae looked toward the flowing river before answering. My name is Kong Hyun-jae. I know that now. No. He slowly turned toward her. I mean, that is my real name. She waited quietly. I never wanted to lie to you. But you did. I know. You let me believe you were someone else. I let you meet the person I wish the world could see. Tears slowly filled her eyes. Why? His voice became almost a whisper. Because every woman I met loved everything except me. He took a slow breath. They loved my money, my influence, my reputation. But no one ever loved the man carrying all the loneliness behind those things. His eyes reflected years of quiet pain. So I disappeared. I wanted one chance. Just one. To know whether someone could care about me before discovering who I was. Zuri remained silent. She could hear the sincerity in every word. But honesty delayed still leaves wounds. You should have trusted me. I wanted to. What stopped you? You. She looked confused. What do you mean? I was afraid. You made me happy. You gave me peace. And I was terrified that telling you the truth would make you look at me the way everyone else does. The tears she had been holding back finally escaped. Not because she feared him, because she finally understood how deeply alone he had been. She remembered the rainy evening when she handed him a towel, the homemade lunchbox, the community garden, the long conversations beside the river. None of those moments had been fake. His feelings had always been genuine. His identity had not. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Finally, Zuri asked the question that mattered most. The article says you're feared by powerful people. Hyun-jae nodded slowly. My family built an organization that controls many businesses. I was born into responsibilities I never asked for. I've spent years trying to turn that power toward protecting the people who depend on us instead of ruling through fear. I can't erase my past, but I can decide what kind of man I become. She studied his face carefully. For the first time, she saw not the confident man she admired, nor the billionaire from the magazine, but a son burdened by expectations. A leader carrying responsibilities no ordinary person could imagine. A lonely man desperately hoping someone would stay. Still, trust could not be rebuilt in a single conversation. I need time. His heart sank. I understand. I don't hate you. Those words alone brought relief. But I need to learn who Kang Hyun-jae really is. He nodded. I'll wait. No matter how long. Days passed. For the first time since they had met, Hyun-jae stopped visiting the cafe. He wanted to honor her request for space. Every morning, he walked past the street from a distance before quietly turning away. Meanwhile, Zuri found herself missing him far more than she expected. The empty chair near the window reminded her of their conversations. Customers laughed as usual. Coffee was served. Life continued. But something important was missing. One afternoon, the cafe owner handed her an envelope. It was delivered this morning. There was no signature. Inside was a handwritten letter. Not from Chairman Kang. Not from the billionaire everyone admired. Simply, Hyun-jae. The letter contained no excuses. No dramatic promises. Only truth. He wrote about losing his parents at a young age. About inheriting responsibilities instead of dreams. About spending years believing love had become impossible. He admitted every fear. Every mistake. Every regret. The final lines read, "If you never speak to me again, I will understand. But thank you. Because for a little while, you reminded me who I was before the world decided who I had to become." Zuri read the letter 3 times. By the end, tears blurred every word. That evening, she walked alone through the community garden where they had planted flowers together. The flowers had begun to bloom beautifully. Children from the nearby hospital laughed as they admired the colorful paths. She smiled through her tears. Without realizing it, Hyun-jae had already shown her the answer she had been searching for. Power had never changed the way he treated people. He had been kind before she knew his name. He remained kind after she discovered it. The only thing that had changed was her knowledge. The next morning, she stood outside the modest apartment where he had been living. Her heart pounded as she knocked on the door. A few seconds later, it opened. Hyun-jae stood frozen. He hadn't expected to see her. Neither of them spoke immediately. Then Zuri smiled softly. "I still don't know everything about you." He looked down. "I know," she continued. "But I'd like to." For the first time in many days, hope returned to his eyes. As they sat together inside the small apartment, talking more honestly than ever before, neither of them realized that another chapter of their journey was quietly beginning. Not one filled with fear, but with difficult choices. Because loving each other was no longer the greatest challenge. Learning how to build one life from 2 completely different worlds would soon test their hearts in ways neither of them had imagined. The morning after Zuri visited Hyun-jae's apartment felt different. For the first time since the truth had been revealed, neither of them was hiding. There were no false names. No carefully avoided questions. No invisible walls standing between 2 hearts that had already chosen each other. As they shared breakfast in the tiny apartment kitchen, Hyun-jae smiled awkwardly. "I never imagined I'd be making toast for someone." Zuri laughed. "And I never imagined Korea's most mysterious billionaire would burn it." He looked down at the slightly blackened bread and laughed for the first time in days. "Maybe being ordinary is harder than I thought." "It isn't," she replied gently. "It just takes practice." Her words reminded him that happiness had never been about perfection. It had always been about sharing life's imperfect moments with the right person. Over the next few weeks, they slowly rebuilt the trust that had been damaged by his secret. Instead of avoiding difficult conversations, they welcomed them. Hyun-jae told her stories about his childhood. He explained how his late father had taught him that true leadership was protecting people, not controlling them. After his parents passed away, he inherited responsibilities long before he was emotionally ready. He had spent years making difficult decisions that left little room for friendships, laughter, or love. Zuri listened without judgment. She did not excuse his mistake, but she understood the fear that had caused it. In return, she shared the dreams she had rarely spoken aloud. She wanted to design parks where children from every background could play together. She wanted to create community spaces filled with flowers, trees, and hope. She wanted people to feel welcome wherever they went. "You've always wanted to build places that heal people," Hyun-jae said. She nodded. "I think beautiful places help broken hearts breathe." Those words stayed with him. A few days later, Hyun-jae made a decision that surprised everyone around him. He invited Zuri to visit his family estate. The mansion stood on a peaceful hill overlooking the city. Its grand entrance, elegant gardens, and impressive architecture reflected generations of success. As the gates slowly opened, Zuri looked around quietly. She wasn't impressed by the luxury. Instead, she noticed how empty everything felt. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "But," he smiled knowingly, "it doesn't feel like a home." She nodded. "It feels lonely." No one had ever described the mansion so honestly. Inside, rows of employees welcomed Hyun-jae with respectful bows. They greeted Zuri with the same courtesy. Many had expected the chairman to choose someone from a wealthy family or an influential business background. Instead, he had brought home a humble woman whose greatest strength was her kindness. Some whispered quietly. Others wondered whether she belonged there. Zuri noticed the curious looks, but remained calm. She smiled at every employee she met. She thanked the housekeepers. She complimented the gardeners for maintaining such beautiful flowers. She even remembered the names of the security guards after meeting them only once. Within days, something unexpected happened. The atmosphere inside the mansion began to change. Employees who had once walked silently through long hallways started smiling more often. Fresh flowers appeared in empty corners. Soft music played during breakfast. The dining room, once used only for formal meetings, became a place where people shared conversations. One afternoon, Min-suk quietly approached Hyun-jae. "I've worked here for 15 years. Hyun-jae looked at him. "I know. I've never seen this house feel alive until now." Hyun-jae glanced toward the garden, where Zuri was teaching several staff members how to plant seasonal flowers. A gentle smile appeared. "Neither have I." Months passed. Their relationship grew stronger with every honest conversation. One evening, Hyun-jae invited Zuri back to the riverside where everything had begun. The city lights shimmered across the calm water exactly as they had on countless evenings before. He reached into his coat pocket. Not for an expensive diamond ring. Not for a grand display meant to impress. Instead, he removed the tiny handwritten note she had placed inside his lunchbox months earlier. The paper had become slightly worn from being carried every day. She recognized it instantly. "You kept it." He smiled. "Every single day." He carefully unfolded the note. The words were still there. "Take care of yourself. Someone has to." He looked into her eyes. "That someone became you." His voice trembled slightly. "I've spent years protecting businesses, employees, and responsibilities. But no one protected my heart until you." He took her hands gently. "Zuri, you loved me before you knew my name. You stayed after learning the truth. You reminded me that I'm more than the life I inherited. I don't want to spend another day wondering what life would be like without you." He slowly knelt before her. "Will you marry me?" Tears filled her eyes before he had even finished speaking. She remembered the lonely man standing in the rain, the ordinary cafe, the community garden, the painful truth, the honest letter. Every moment had led them here. She smiled through happy tears. "Yes." His eyes closed with overwhelming relief as she wrapped her arms around him. For the first time in many years, Kang Hyun-jae felt completely at peace. Their wedding was elegant but intimate. Instead of inviting the country's most influential families, they surrounded themselves with people who had genuinely touched their lives. The cafe owner attended proudly. The elderly woman they had once helped carried flowers down the aisle. The children from the community garden presented them with handmade drawings instead of expensive gifts. Even the mansion employees celebrated like one big family. No amount of wealth could have created a more meaningful day. After their marriage, Hyun-jae slowly transformed both his businesses and his family's legacy. He invested in community centers, public parks, scholarships, and neighborhood projects inspired by Zuri's lifelong dream. Together, they designed beautiful spaces where families gathered, children laughed, and strangers became friends. People still respected Chairman Kong, but now they admired him for different reasons. Not because he was powerful, because he was compassionate. Years later, a little girl ran laughing through one of the gardens they had built together. She held both her parents' hands tightly. "Daddy," she asked innocently, "were you really scary before you met Mommy?" Hyun-jae laughed. "I wasn't scary." Zuri raised an eyebrow playfully. "Oh," he smiled. "I was just very lonely." Their daughter looked at her mother. "What changed?" Zuri squeezed his hand lovingly. "We found each other." The little girl smiled. "Then I'm glad you did." As the family walked beneath rows of blooming cherry blossom trees, Hyun-jae realized something he had searched for his entire life. Power could earn respect. Money could buy comfort. Success could build empires. But only genuine love could make a lonely heart feel at home. And in the end, the most feared man in Korea was remembered not for the empire he inherited, but for the family he built with the woman who loved him simply for who he was. This story reminds us that the strongest relationships are never built on wealth, reputation, or status. They are built on honesty, patience, forgiveness, and the courage to let someone see your true self. Trust may take time to rebuild, but when two people choose grace over pride and understanding over fear, love becomes powerful enough to heal even the deepest loneliness. Sometimes, the greatest treasure in life is not finding someone who admires your success, but finding someone who loves your heart before they ever notice your title. If you made it this far, let us know where you're watching from and comment your favorite moment below. Like this video and subscribe to _Threads for more emotional Mafia love stories.